Hello and welcome to Sparky Hobbies. My name is Ben, and today I'm going to do a question and response video that's a little bit more techy than what the channel is really geared towards for newer players. I did a review of the War of Attrition event deck about a week ago, and this specifically kind of addresses the question that TX Shavers had, which would you mind going over more about how you used your sideboards during rounds, and mainly which cards you switch from your main to your side. So the focus of his question is what do you take out when you want to focus on your sideboard. And so when I talk about what matches I played up against and what cards I want to address. Some of these cards, like obviously, are here before you, and I'll link to the deck list of the War of Attrition. But the decks that I played against, I'm not going to go ahead and go through all those links again. If you want to link back to those cards and those decks, you're going to have to follow the links in my review of the War of Attrition event decks, and I'll go ahead and just link you to those videos. So if you're a newer player and you're not really into hearing all about these cards that you don't understand and names that you have not memorized, I would say not worry about it. This is basically to talk about my experience with the War of Attrition deck and the sideboarding, and to address TX Shaver's question as best as I can. Now, I am not an expert of sideboarding. This deck comes with a bit of a story in the sense that I just recently moved into an area and I don't play tournaments, I don't play standard, I play casual, and they were having a tournament in standard and I needed a deck. And so I bought this one, and out of 15 players, I got first. And so I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I guess I'll come again next week. And then I got third. And so the deck is very well built to win these events. And I did use the sideboard to make sure that I could win some of those events. So that's what I'm going to go over a little bit today. My first matchup, and like I said, you can follow the links in the other review videos. So the first 4 matches are review 1 of War of Attrition, and then the following 5 are the second review, my second experience the next week of the tournament, basically. Was against Omen Machine, Emrakul, Liliana Vess, and what they were trying to do is get out a black Liliana Vess to do something in conjunction with Omen Machine to get Emrakul earlier. Okay, and I sort of set this up so that hopefully my camera doesn't be bastardly. I kind of set this up to see that you can see my sideboard here is in the middle, and then the main deck of what I think it's trying to do is on the left, and then cards that I think are situational and usually late game are on the right here. So we're going to go ahead and look at the sideboard here right now, which is I have 4 copies of the core Firewalker, protection from red, gain life whenever red spells play. I have 4 copies of revoke resistance, remove target chant or artifact. Have a core duelist, Apostle's Blessing, 2 copies of creature removal, of arrest, and 2 copies of arrest, 3 copies of Celestial Purge, the exile target black or red permanent. Okay, and so I think this first match is a good example of, I guess, the first rule of sideboarding. My sideboarding rule is basically, either you need to shore up weaknesses in your own deck or nerf their deck. And against Omen Machine, I had 2 solid matches and I didn't need to change anything. So I guess that would be the first rule. What this deck is trying to do, if you look over here on the left side, it plays cheap aggressive creatures, the 2/1 Elite Vanguard, the 3/1 First Strike Porcelain Legionnaire, 4 copies of Lenonin Skywalker, 4 copies of Flare Husk. It does have 2 copies of Stoneforge Mystic. Oh, and this goes back into the days that basically Stoneforge Mystic was legal. And actually, for this deck, if you play this deck unchanged, you can play with Stoneforge Mystic, and it's legal in this particular circumstance. But they did recently ban it, so this is before that. about 2 weeks ago. Mirror Pure Steel Paladin. So this deck is trying to be very creature aggressive, and I didn't have any problems beating Omen Machine. This deck was just too fast, and so I didn't have to dip into the sideboard, which is kind of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or if you don't see any foreseeable problems, I didn't get to really see what his deck did because this deck just, won by turns 4 or 5. I can't really remember, but I didn't really need anything. The second match, however, really tested the limits of this deck, which is Caw-Blade. Now, Caw-Blade is hands down a more superior deck. I don't think that this deck won. I won 2-1. Won the match with 2-1. I don't think that this deck won on luck, but I definitely think the odds favor Caw-Blade. I think Caw-Blade is just a much better deck. And when I was looking at how to stop a Stoneforge Mystic and how to stop the Squadron Hawks, the Lenonin Skyhunters really did a lot for me in taking down early Squadron Hawks, because it was either block these or basically die. And he did trade quite a bit of Squadron Hawks with my Lenonin Skyhunters. And of course, so I didn't really need to take anything. Now, when I look at what I'm going to do here for a second round against Caw-Blade, I could grab the 4 copies of Revoke Resistance to possibly take out a sword or like a Batterskull, and that might be a pretty good idea. Especially since, if you think about it, Caw-Blade without artifacts is really, a fairly tame deck. So really the artifact removal is important, but really the Lenonin Relic Warder did enough for me that I didn't really feel this is like situational cards in the main deck that and Lenonin Relic Warder and all these other cards are in the main. But when I started looking at Caw-Blade, I'm looking at basically cards. If I'm going to remove something, I'm going to remove Apostle's Blessing, Sword of Vengeance, and Bonehoard, because those are mostly late game. And Caw-Blade, if I don't have that game wrapped up real early, Caw-Blade's gonna win. There's no fooling yourself about what deck is better. Caw-Blade's a better deck. And so when I'm going to go and grab those 2 copies of Revoke Resistance, maybe, and those 2 copies of Arrest, I'm looking to take out the Bonehoard. Bonehoard would be nice late game because plenty of things go to the graveyard versus Caw-Blade, but like I said, I needed the focus to be on controlling Caw-Blade early and just getting the match over with. So Bonehoard is a finisher, but it's not constant pressure, and I just needed to lay on constant pressure. So I sided out the Bonehoard and the Sword of Vengeance and the Apostle's Blessing to bring in 3 of those copies, and then Kemba, I might have taken out Kemba to get the Arrest. I don't quite remember, but that would be a card that I would look at to possibly remove, because it's kind of a shenanigan kind of thing of just getting cards. Now, I did not take Kimba out. I did actually use her to sort of overpower one deck. I'm not sure what card I took out to make sure I get the 2 copies of Arrest and 2 copies of Rogue Resistance. I know I took the Bonehoard out, Sword of Vengeance, Apostle's Blessing. But I'm basically looking to control Caw-Blade as much as I can and put the conditional pressure. And Arrest is nice, obviously, because it means that their Stoneforge Mystic can't be activated. And so that's what I would take out. I would take out probably the Bonehoard, the Sword of Vengeance, and the Apostle's Blessing. In fact, the Sword of Vengeance is really only in there for if you're fighting something like a Titan, where you really need to punch through for damage and something standing in your way. Otherwise, Sword of Vengeance could be taken out, almost always. And most of these cards are pretty redundant. If you go over here and look at your main and you see the 4 copies of Porcelain Legionnaire, Sky Hunter, Flare Husk, most of those are very redundant cards, and so protecting your creature here with the Apostle's Blessing is not really going to be very key, and using the protection to get through for damage is really kind of limited because you do have the flyers and you do have the Mirren Crusader who has protection from black and green, so you're already kind of protected from two colors if you really need to equip somebody up and strike for the last bit of damage. So those are kind of like the key cards that I'm going to start looking for. And also, the Sickle Slicer is a 2/2 for 3. He's a little bit more expensive. He's also a living weapon. Obviously, that's pretty good. But um, if I need something faster pace, I might look for the Sickle Cell too. But anyway, during my Cobblade matchup, I really wanted the 2 copies of Arrest and 2 copies of Revoke Resistance in addition. I could have brought all 4 in, but I think I kind of I could have took out the Core Duelist, I guess, just because their main benefit as a 1-drop is really only if you equip them, which is really too slow against Cobblade. So I could have taken out these two to maybe bring in a couple more Revoke Resistance, because, like I said, with Cobblade, a Cobblade without artifacts is going to be pretty weak. My third game in that match to really win the tournament was against Mono Red Goblin Rush. So plenty of goblins, plenty of rush. Again, I don't think I took out Bonehoard because I realized things would die, and I really wanted to have the finisher. But I did take out the Sword of Vengeance because goblins aren't large. I took out the Apostle's Blessing. Um, what else did I take out?